Welcome back after your second exam. I trust all that went well. And we're just about to begin our third unit. And this one is we just finished modern philosophy with our examples of Rene Descartes and David Hume. And now we're doing mostly 20th century, although the first one began in the latter part of the 19th century. We're going to do pragmatism and existentialism. So those are our last two parts, and then we will be done. So today's lecture is an introduction to pragmatism. The next time we will read an essay by William James about the pragmatic approach to belief and faith and such. And of course, we'll also read the response to that with William Clifford, but those are a great pair. But that's next time. Meanwhile, we're going to try to get a handle on this thing called pragmatism. Okay? Let's start. Let's see here. Pragmatism is an American phenomenon that was first espoused by a fellow named Charles Sanders Peirce. That's pronounced Peirce. It's spelled kind of funny right there. It's not Pierce. In the mid to late 19th century. Following Peirce, William James was the one who popularized his view. Then we have the other great pragmatists on the timeline right there. John Dewey, Jane Addams, George Herbert Mead, and C.I. Lewis. Really, the big ones there are Peirce, James, and Dewey for most of us, but nonetheless, depending on who you're talking to there. But notice the timeline. All these folks, Peirce died in 1914, and James in 1910. So they were sort of the early pioneers. John Dewey, even though he was born in the latter part of the 19th century, he wrote all the way up until he died in the 1950s. And he is probably one of the most influential philosophers ever. So that's our timeline. Now, the word pragmatism comes from a root that means act, deed, or affair. This shows the spirit of the pragmatist movement. Now, think all the way back a long time ago to Socrates when we talked about him. Socrates brought philosophy down from the clouds to the marketplace. Remember how those that first period of philosophy, how they were speculating wildly about, is everything earth, air, fire, water, whatever? Well, Socrates brought it back down to earth. When we read the Euthyphro, we saw, he brought this very practical question. I'm doing the pious thing. What's piety? So he was trying to figure out stuff that really mattered for life, right? So pragmatism brought philosophy down from the academy to the laboratory, the factory, the workshop, the studio, and the home. Okay? Historically at this time, now we're talking the late 19th, early 20th century, philosophers had become professors instead of philosophers. They dealt with very technical questions that had little to do with practical affairs. So, the idealistic metaphysics that dominated the 19th century, this is just wildly speculative stuff. In the 20th century, mathematics and logic began to dominate. This is very high-powered stuff that had very little with solving real problems and solving real-world problems with how people think. So the problems had become very, very abstract, aloof. Okay, and I even had one professor in grad school who told me that ontology had nothing to do with reality. It's just a logical puzzle. This makes philosophy kind of useless, right? Well, the pragmatist reconstruction of philosophy was concerned not with replacing that theoretical stuff with the practical, but rather they wanted to get rid of the distinction. Okay? William James notes that pure theory is empty and meaningless. Okay? It lacks any meaningful context. Theory disconnected from a problem doesn't do anything. Theory, though, is incredibly important because it keeps our practical inquiries on a coherent path. Philosophy, though, must have significance for human action in general. Thus, what philosophers do ought to have practical import, though it still can indeed be very academic. Academic theory can have great practical import. Think, for example, in the academy, Einstein came up with E equals mc squared. Can't get much more academic than that, but yet look at what it gave us. Things like nuclear power and stuff like that. So, I mean, it's incredibly important. So, thus, pragmatism approaches philosophy not by asking, what does it mean, but by asking, what's it supposed to do? Philosophy is to be understood functionally as an ongoing process or inquiry that serves social ends. Now, in the 20th century, the pragmatists conceived the task of philosophy to assimilate the effect of science on human affairs. Pragmatism is genetic, that is, it's historical in its orientation. Note that what science had done at the dawn of the 20th century. Okay? You have Darwin, right? Darwin in 1859 published The Origin of Species. That changed the world, literally. That changed our world. Okay? Marx wrote Capital in 1867, which revolutionized and changed the way we look at economics and the way money works and such. Freud and Einstein, think about their effect on the world. Science had dramatically changed the world and had taken centrality in our understanding of things. The rise and domination of science, historically speaking, had resulted in a bifurcated world. Go back to Descartes, for instance. The rise of science, Descartes stuck in the mind, but he still wanted the science out there, so that in the realm of mind, there you had value, there you had religion, there you had all those ethics and all that. However, outside of that, the external world, that's where you have matter, that's where you have body, that's where you have fact, that's where you have nature. Okay? So that these splits between mind and matter, fact and value, humans and nature. Pragmatism denies these bifurcations and seeks to put the human being back in nature. Science had taken our rightful place, and we were to take it back. Okay? Science had removed humanity from nature, and we want to take our rightful place back. Pragmatism insists that human experience is as a natural a phenomenon as anything that the scientist studies. Okay? It must retake humanity, must retake its centrality. Look, all of this is real. Dreams, fantasies, myth, magic, and penitentiaries, to borrow a list from John Dewey. All of this is real. Okay? Thus, pragmatism is humanistic and scientific in an integrated fashion. It hates dualisms. Now, one of the great pragmatists, William James, observed that most philosophers are either tough-minded or tender-minded. The tender-minded. These are, by the way, are James's words, descriptions of these. They are rationalistic, going by principles, intellectualistic, idealistic, optimistic, religious, free willist, monistic, dogmatical. And this would largely be the rationalist school of thought. Okay? The tough-minded, on the other hand, they tend to be empiricists, going by facts, sensationalistic, and by that he means they focus on the senses, like on the input of sense data. David Hume, for example, he focused strictly on the sight, right? So the sense of sight was it. So that's what we call a sensationalistic philosopher. They're materialistic, believing everything is matter in motion. Okay? They're pessimistic, irreligious, remember Hume, fatalistic, pluralistic, and skeptical. And again, Hume kind of comes to mind there, doesn't he? Pragmatism, though, is both. Okay? It is tough-minded in its determination to live in the world as it is, rather than in a fantasy world of metaphysicians and theologians. It recognizes that science, broadly construed, provides us with the best way of knowing the world. But it is tender-minded in its unwavering conviction, in its faith, that human values and purposes are also a part of nature, natural events just like any other, Matters of fact for which any scientific account of the world must provide a place. All of this is real. Experience itself, this is real. Okay? So, again, pragmatism, and most of us, are actually a bit of both tender-minded and tough-minded. Okay? But we are caught up in a dualism that threatens to split our personalities. Pragmatism fights this dualism. It is more humanistic than one and more scientific than the other. The tough-minded are considered pessimists, realists, right? The tender-minded as optimists. The difference between the two: an optimist is someone who thinks that this is the best of all possible worlds. The pessimist is someone who's afraid that the optimist is right. Pragmatism is neither. Instead, this is a fancy word for you, it's melioristic. Not pessimism, but meliorism. Okay? This is neither the best possible world nor the worst possible world, but it's the world that we have. We're stuck with it. And one that our job is to make it better. That's what meliorism is. It's not the best or the worst. It's the world we've got, and our job is to make it better. That's the bottom line. Okay? But more important than resolving the conflicts is the method used. Pragmatism emphasizes method over result. Science is a method to some end. Of course, scientific method, right? We all learn that in our science classes. Democracy is a method for governance decision-making. Morality is a method. It is. It's a method to help us get along with one another, also as a method for advising us how to live well, right? So it's a method. There are three characteristics of the pragmatic method that I want to make salient. The first is the method is contextualist. Okay, this is a fancy word, but just to sort of put it in other words, there's nothing without a context. Everything has its background, its baggage, and its history. Okay? Contextualism implies that both the data and the solutions to our problems are relative to a context. Not merely to the think so of the philosopher, but to the factors at work in the context in which the problem arises and is to be solved. And it implies that no problem can be solved once and for all, because the problems that we find are found in our particular situations. In a different situation, we're likely to face different problems. And the solution to the problems that we have over here may or may not help with problems over there. Now, that's not to say that we can't learn from how other cultures or places solve problems, but you don't want to just take those whole, without looking at the factors that might have, you're going to be really careful with that, right? Because solutions are for particular problems. Okay? So no problem can be solved once for all because things change. There are no ultimates, there are no absolutes, because there is no ultimate or absolute context unless that be the domain exclusively of God and not, which is not our point of view. We can't see it from such a point of view. Okay? Oops. Second, the method is genetic. In this, it believes that many of our problems have their roots in our history, and I find this to be true. And to begin to reconstruct our thought, we must explore how we get where we are. One of the great pragmatists, maybe the greatest, John Dewey, for example, in his works, he's a master at exploring the history and the genesis of the problems that we have. His analysis is always spot on, and it helps us to understand how did we get here. And in order to solve a problem, you have to know how did we get here. It's a great place to start. Third, we look for continuities. Okay, pragmatism hates dualisms. There is no distinction between appearance and reality. Some of us might find that refreshing after all this talk about that kind of stuff. Between fact and value, between experience and nature, etc. The world is what experience reveals it to be. How about that? There can be no talk of what lies outside of experience. Okay? Now, with that background, let's begin to get a little bit specific here. Let's talk about our first pragmatist, or the first pragmatist. How about that? In 1878, Peirce wrote a landmark essay called How to Make Our Ideas Clear. In this essay, he put forth what he called the Pragmatic Maxim. When asking about the meaning of a proposition, we must ask, suppose this proposition were true, what conceivable bearing might it have on the conduct of our lives? If it makes no difference, then the proposition is idle speculation. So in order for a proposition to be meaningful, it has to have some bearing. In other words, it has to make a difference. Or as William James says, a difference that makes no difference is no difference. Okay? And I like that. Now, let me offer up an example for this. Suppose we have two archaeologists. One happens to be a philosophical materialist. That is, he believes that all there is matter and motion, and the laws governing thereof. The other, instead, is what we call an idealist. He believes that all exists are minds and ideas. That material substance is that's just a construction of scientists just to try to help us understand things. But it really all that exists are minds and ideas. To be is to be perceived. Okay, and these two archaeologists have just made this magnificent. They've discovered this artifact that's really valuable, and I can't believe the good fortune of this. And they've got this valuable thing sitting on the table in between them, and they're talking about what they're going to do with it, and then the idealist says, isn't that great? What a great idea that is. I mean, all that exists are minds and ideas, and that's an idea existing in our minds. The materialist says, oh no, that's matter. Matter and motion. That's all that exists. What's this idea you're talking about? So they begin this great argument over the materialism versus idealism. But at the end of the day, you know what? They're going to do whatever they do with it regardless of that difference. That is, they're either going to sell it, take it to a museum, take it to somewhere. I mean, they're going to show off their great discovery. It doesn't make a difference. A difference that makes no difference is no difference. You want to call it ideas? Fine. You want to call it matter? Fine. I guess it might depend, it might be more useful to do it one way or the other, depending on the context of the inquiry, but ultimately, it doesn't matter. Why? Because look, meanings always occur in a context of action. And the dispute between my two archaeologists, that was just a verbal dispute. That's all. It wasn't a real dispute. Notice this. I said it always occur in a context of action. I say action and not language because language is an abstraction. Real meanings aren't absolute linguistically. That is, words don't essentially mean things apart from the context. They're always tied to human activities, meanings are. And remember, they are contextual. Okay? That is, meanings are both relative and they are objective. In a phrase, they're objectively relative. And that is not a contradiction, by the way. Let me explain. Okay? The relativism side of this. Meaning comes out of interaction, and interaction is the essence of an event. Okay? About objective, John Dewey says, the quotation right there, Meanings are objective because they are modes of natural interaction. Such an interaction includes things and energies external to living creatures. So the basis of meaning is interaction, and nothing in and by itself is a meaning. Meaning only and always occurs in a context and is the product of interaction. Given this, now this may not be clear, but an example here will help. Given this, the same event may have different meanings or many meanings in various relations. Okay? For example, consider a single event, a thunderstorm. What does that event mean? Well, depends on the context of interaction right there, right? A thunderstorm, it may mean joy to the drought-stricken farmer. All right, we got watering the crops. All right. Okay? It could be disaster for the picnicker or the golfers or the baseball players. Oh no, we got to cancel the game. We got to cancel the picnic. Oh no, that can be disaster. Oh shoot. Okay? Or it may be overtime for the meteorologist. You can see James Spann taking his jacket, rolling up his sleeves, getting to work. Means hard work. Okay? Now, notice this. Such meanings are diverse and they can be contradictory, yet each is objective and real. In that particular interaction, that is what it means. Okay? All relations are real. No relation can exhaust any given event's potentiality. Okay? Because each is a product of natural interaction in various contexts. Our perception of an event, we're the picnickers. We see this disaster. Oh no! It's raining. Okay? But this is never all there is to the story because we cannot see all of the infinite possibilities for that event. We're not the farmer who is currently celebrating the coming of the rain. Okay? Yet each perspective, the farmer, the picnicker, the ball player, the weatherman, all of these, okay? These are all the perceptions of that same event. It's the same existential occurrence or interacting with a variety of points of view. That same event has infinite potentialities for meaning depending upon the interaction. John Dewey argues that to treat one particular meaning as what is really real and others as somehow artificial is to adopt a static view of things and to treat one potential relation as though it constituted the reality of the situation. Yet, according to objective relativism, there is no ultimate reality of the situation. Every relation is a reality, and no one relation exhausts what a thing is. Now, the old conception of meaning. Meanings are constructions of the mind. Oops. Pragmatism is critical of abstractions. Now, we need them, but they want to keep them in their proper place. Mind, conceived as substance, is an abstraction. Okay? Contra Descartes. Mind is not a substance. But it is nothing more than the ability to manipulate symbols. It's not some mysterious faculty. No, we tend to think of mind as substance, thanks again to Descartes, but instead we should think of it as a verb or an adverb. It's a how we do things. To say something about mind is to talk about certain ways of doing things, not about a secret agent who does them for us. The mind isn't some spooky thing inside of us. Instead, it's the ability to manipulate symbols. As such, it isn't just private and subjective. It has a very public component too. We can watch one another thinking through problems. Okay? All of this. So much for meaning. Let's go to truth. In its theory of truth, pragmatism wants to analyze what we mean by truth. Now, this right here, this is what I have on the screen there, that is the traditional conception of truth. We might call this the correspondence theory of truth. Notice in that left-hand side, the person's idea, okay, the ball is in the left-hand box, it's in the box. It matches what is in the world, therefore it corresponds to what is in the world, therefore it's true. Okay? On the right, the idea the person has, in the idea, the ball is in the bucket, okay, whereas in reality, the ball is in the box. So, on the one hand, we have a true idea, on the other hand, we have a false idea. This model is incredibly superficial, and for the pragmatist, is woefully mistaken. Okay? William James, in perhaps a less unfortunate formulation, says that true ideas are those we can assimilate, validate, corroborate, and verify. False ideas are those we cannot. I'm not exactly sure how to parse that right now, so we'll just go on to something else. But for him, truth happens to an idea. It becomes true in its use, in its usefulness. But you know what? Let's sort of leave that behind us. Let's go on a little bit. The pragmatist does not see truth as an end in itself, but rather as a preliminary means toward other vital satisfactions. Knowledge is not merely a record of the past, by the way, not even history. Rather, it's a reconstruction of the present directed towards fulfillment of the emerging future. That's true even of history, by the way. True sentences are not such they correspond to a particular state of affairs, like that first picture. Rather, it's a matter of its interaction with things and its involvement in affairs. It does not consist in some sort of mystery matching or resemblance or correspondence to the facts. Truth, see, facts are about the past, right? Truth isn't backward-looking, but forward-looking. Okay? True statements are more like predictions than they are descriptions. Thus, in the act of knowing, we are not spectators viewing a field of objects. Scientific observation is never mere observation. It's always active and it's always selective. Let's go once again back to Descartes. He wanted pure observation, strip away everything you ever believed, and start again completely from scratch. By the way, you can't do that. You can't do that. Okay? You can't do that because you always have a baggage, you always have a whole bunch of stuff you know that you can never get rid of, all that background, all that knowledge, all that custom. Okay? All that stuff is still there and you can never get rid of it. Descartes acted as if he could throw away everything he ever knew and start afresh. But guess what? You can't do that. It's impossible. We always start with the world. Okay? The only place to start an inquiry is right where you are, right here and now. Thus, the spectator theory of knowledge is denied. Let's talk about value for a while. This is taking us towards the end here. Values are just as factual as facts, traditional facts. Okay? The distinction for pragmatism isn't between fact and value, but between old and new values, shared and competing values, unreflective and thoughtful values. Values fall within the domain of science, broadly construed, because we critically appraise them on the basis of intelligent reflection of the facts. Hopefully we do that. The value lies in both ends and means. Okay? That is, You can't privilege one or the other, ends or means. We choose the road on the basis of our destination, where we want to go. That's the means. But we also pick the destination on the basis of the conditions of the roads. If that road's too rough, we might not use that means. Okay? But also, pragmatism denies categorical imperatives. And this would be, for example, like those absolute moral rules that tell you got to do this, you got to do it that way, you got to do it this way, boom, boom, boom. Okay? And the reason it does this, for values cannot realistically be conceived in isolation. Look, a categorical imperative conceives of values in isolation. This is a rule no matter what. Okay? Values are not only conditioned by circumstances, but also by the indefinite multiplicity of other values with which they are implicated in the real world. To insist that something is a value no matter what is to repudiate either the world of causal connection or everything else in the realm of value. Nothing is a value no matter what. Okay? Thus, we are inescapably relative. But this isn't just simple relativism, y'all. Remember the objective relativism. Okay? Remember the contextualism. The world of value is pluralistic. The gospel says, "In my Father's house are many mansions." Sometimes a difference in value is just that, only a difference. Yet this relativism is not subjectivity. Okay? Remember, what we have here is objective relativism. Values are relative to the persons and circumstances to which the valuation refers. But once this reference is specified, okay, once it's there, boom, it's not just a matter of think so, but what is taken to be good is good. This isn't relative to the judger, but it's to whose good is being judged and the situation at large. In other words, it's relative to the entire situation, the entire moral situation. Okay? Thus, in ethics, for example, we would note that no one right answer will fit all situations, but all situations have a right answer. Actually, I prefer a better answer. No one better answer will fit all situations, but all situations have a better answer. Better is the ultimate moral value there. Okay? So, that's value. Finally, we're going to consider just briefly what this pragmatic method would suggest about some of the philosophical problems that we've come up with so far in our class. Two big ones. The mind-body problem we saw in Descartes, and the question of free will that keeps sort of poking up its head in our class through various things. And let's start with pragmatism and free will. Okay? Charles Peirce, he made this very quirky sort of statement that matter is mind hidebound with habits. And notice that, okay, as human beings evolved, as animals evolved, we evolved from lower graded matter. However, if matter didn't have some degree of novelty involved with it, we never could have come out of that. Okay? So when matter is hidebound with habits, the higher the organism you get, the lesser hidebound with habits you become, but nonetheless, we're all habitual creatures. But we can work to change our habits in ways that matter can't. Okay? Remember again in Hume, we're all habitual creatures. Remember custom? Right? Free will, what that consists of is the ability to modify habits as needed or required. Sometimes such modification is very hard, very challenging. Quit smoking, for example. That one's tough. Okay? Other times, maybe not so much. Eat more fruit. Well, you can do that. You might not want to, but it's not so hard. Okay? But some people, notice, can modify their habits more easily than others. Given this, then, notice, free will is not an either-or thing. It's how much, if any. Some people just don't seem to have it at all. Others seem to have it more. Some in between. Work at it. Our final problem is the mind-body problem. Okay. Notice this. Descartes, we have two substances, mind and body. And of course, we had that nasty problem interaction that we just finished talking about before. Pragmatism instead adopts a process philosophy. For Descartes, substance is basic. In process philosophy, events are basic, and substances are derived from events, so that mind and body are abstractions or outcomes of the underlying activity, that is, of the events. Okay? Under this kind of conception, mind is not a substantial thing, but it's a way of doing things. We talk about mind, we talk about how we behave. We behave mentally. Okay? So in the world of events, some events function mentally. Those are our thoughtful events, right? Some events function materially. Our bodily events, for example. Mind and body, then, physical and mental, are characters of natural events. Thus, there is no mind-body problem because it's two ways. It's just two ways that events can manifest themselves. Okay. Now, by the way, both of these problems are, of course, much more in depth, and but that's another class that perhaps you'll take someday. Your assignment. Describe as thoroughly as you can the pragmatist account of value, and that Kaplan. Well, that's not true. That's the book it came from originally. But this Kaplan essay, this is on the Moodle right there. He discusses that on pages 35 through 40. That's 5 pages. It's a very, very good discussion of the pragmatist theory of value. I would like for you to explore that, to go back and look at what I said, and see if you can make sense of it, and then tell me what you think about that. Does it make sense to you? Why or why not? About 2 pages, and there'll be a turn-in button on the Moodle page. So, happy day, y'all. Stay safe. Wash your hands.